So I'll start with my story from a young age. So at around the age of 12, my aunt passed away. And actually she passed away from cancer, but instead of being sad about her, I started to realize that I won't live forever. And I was really sad for myself. And I decided that maybe the right thing that I should do is try to understand why do we die, how can we stop the clock, how can we increase the lifespan and health span. I assume that we can discuss what is the difference in this definition later. And that's actually drove me to study biology. You can hear from my accent that I'm not a Native American, was born and raised in Israel. Did my undergrad at Tel Aviv University, a PhD at the Weizmann Institute, and then came here to Boston in 2002 and did my postdoctoral fellowship here at MIT actually, at the lab of Lenny Guarente. If anyone know him, he's one of the leaders of aging research. A fun story is about my PhD study. I came to the Weizmann Institute, which is the best institute at Israel, let's say, similar to MIT. And there wasn't any lab that studied aging at that time. So my strategy was, let's go to the best lab at the Weizmann in biology and try to convince the professor to study aging. It wasn't easy, but he basically sent me to the library, and after 2 weeks, at that time, by the way, there wasn't internet, so I had to, I don't know if some people are old enough, you have to push like a disk of every year of PubMed and try to search, and I found that there was a gene or a protein was cloned at that time, and it's called Werner syndrome. I don't know if you heard about it. It's a premature aging syndrome, but it's an interesting protein because it's helicase in exonuclease. Anyway, I worked through that for a few years at the Weizmann, and then I decided to come to MIT. At that time, it was the best lab that studied aging, the lab of Lenny Guarente. They studied the CO2 family of deacetylase. I'm sure that most of you know David Sinclair. So David Sinclair was a postdoc at the same lab. I studied the aging for, I studied at MIT for 5 years. It was a lot of fun, actually. I really enjoyed it. But I also enjoyed this area. I assume that all of you know this area. It's called Kendall Square. And if you look at a mile around Kendall Square, you have maybe thousands of companies of biotech, high-tech, pharmaceutical, and so on. And also you have MIT in the mix as well. At that time, Lenny, the professor, started his own company. David, which became my friend, started his own company. I'm sure that...
David who?
David Sinclair.
Who, by the way, might be coming physically tomorrow or at least talking remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I needed a reagent as a postdoc at MIT, so I looked at the Merck catalog, and suddenly they withdrew the compound from the catalog. So I asked the lady at Merck, where is this reagent? And she said, oh, it's a small startup, a spin out of BU. So I called them and they started to work with them. So what I'm saying, I started to be exposed to a lot of companies. By the way, I also got my grant or my fellowship from Estée Lauder, the cosmetic company, because I studied skin aging. Basically that was the trip that my wife likes the most, because every time that I came back from the headquarters, I came with a bag with a lot of products. So she encouraged me to travel that more. So during that time, I started to realize that maybe I can contribute more to humanity if I start my own company than being a professor in the academia that maybe will publish 1 or 2 papers a year that maybe 10 other scientists will read. And I knew that I want to do something related to aging, but I haven't had a clue exactly what. So I moved to the industry. I worked in at that time it's called a computational biology, system biology company. Small company here in Cambridge, the name was Genstruct. And that's basically, if you ask today, it's AI. But at that time, nobody knew what is AI. What they developed a process that allow you to push a lot of data, let's say from microarray or proteomics, and basically build a network analysis. So based on a changing of expression, you can then predict what is the transcription factor that they change, going up or down and so on. So I worked there, and actually at that time, David Sinclair company used this company, so we did some work on SIR2, but also I decided to use this platform to try to understand what happened with caloric restriction. So I collected all the data, publicly available data that you can collect from there, pass it via this platform, and basically build a network analysis, try to understand, okay, what's happening under the hood? Because at that time, and I believe that still even today, we don't really understand what happened with caloric restriction. So I identified, I don't know, 18 to 20 different pathways, the serotonin pathway, the insulin pathway, another, that changing with caloric restriction if you compare caloric restriction mice versus normal mice. But also use some controls. So one was resveratrol, what David Sinclair found. And I tried to see what is the effect of resveratrol and how similar resveratrol to that, and also young versus old mice. And what I found that either resveratrol or young versus old mice only cover like 20% of what caloric restriction is doing. So basically, caloric restriction is not, let's say resveratrol is not a complete mimetic of caloric restriction. And then I was paused a bit and thought about that, and I realized that if at that time resveratrol was the best caloric restriction mimetic, so then you will need maybe 20 of those, or maybe more, in order to mimic caloric restriction completely. And then I said, why should we use small molecules or a drug? Why can't we use food as a drug of choice? So that was basically the aurora moment of InsideTracker. Let's try to bring the drug cabinet from the bathroom to the refrigerator. Let's use food as a drug of choice. And then the question was, okay, how would we know what person X or person Y should eat? And I started to look around. I mean, me and my co-founder, and we realized that the best marker to understand what's happening inside your body is the blood. Because if you think about it, blood is a liquid gold. Every physician or clinician uses it. 70% of the medical decisions are done based blood, but none of our wellness decisions are done by that. So I started to look at the Quest Diagnostic. Quest Diagnostic is the biggest diagnostic company in the US at least. They had 4,000 blood biomarkers. So I said, we cannot test all of them. It will be very expensive, and maybe we won't have enough blood in our vein to test all of them. Maybe with Theranos we could, but it sounds like it's not happening. So I spent a few years basically looking at biomarker by biomarker and trying to find which are the biomarkers that we want to test. So it was a pretty detailed and long process, and I came with a few criteria. Again, it's not an AI, it was my brain and a few other people, but basically, let's look at biomarker of health and not a disease. So I didn't want to focus on biomarkers that related to cancer, for example, but let's look at biomarkers that are more showing you how is your metabolism, how is your health, how is your stress. Then let's look at biomarkers that at least 1% of the population is out of normal, because I don't want to waste the money of the customer. So that was important for me. Let's really use a biomarker that at least 1% of the population have an issue with. And the last one is a biomarker that you can modulate with mainly food, but also supplement, exercise, and lifestyle changes. So, for example, the thyroid marker, you cannot do it. You need basically to inject or give them iodine pills. But for example, for glucose, you have a lot of things that you can do. You can exercise, you can eat more fiber, and there are a zillion of other things that you can do in order to modulate it without drug. So that was basically the aurora moment. And then we started to spend time. I hired some developers. We developed the platform. We developed the algorithm. We developed, at that time it was more expert system. Today it's more AI. And basically hired some biologists that build the knowledge, so we extracted a lot of data from a peer-reviewed scientific publication, and then started to get into the consumer, and the method was that let's start, instead of, I really wanted to go to diabetic and cardiovascular disease patient, but a few of my smart advisors told me, listen, it's very hard to to convince them, but also they are not motivated and they don't have a lot of money in their pocket. So I got a good advice, let's go for the athletic active population or professional athletes. And we started with them. We spent some time with triathletes, marathon runners, cyclists, and a lot of professional athletes. We have now thousands of professional athletes, that teams and athletes that are using the platform. And what was nice about that they were willing to pay a lot of money. So I always say that the best investor is your customer. I really follow that. So when I started, even when I did the first pilot of 50 people, everyone paid at least $250. Because they said, if you don't pay first, you take it less seriously. And second, I need the money, because raising money is not easy. Especially for someone that's doing it first time. And I assume that most of you are first-time entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur that did it before and they had a good exit, all the investors that invested in you in the first time will invest in you again. So we started with that, and also I listened a lot to the customers. So I interviewed them. I started, today we have 50 biomarkers, but at that time we started with around 10. And then I went to those triathletes and said, oh, we really want to have testosterone. Okay, we added testosterone. And so on and so forth, then cortisol and so on. So you're learning from them what they want, and hopefully you're interviewing enough people, because if one person wants testosterone, the rest don't want it, it's not good. But if you ask 10 people and 8 saying that they want testosterone, it's very likely that it's a good representation. It's better to ask 100, but again, it's a matter of budget and time. So we added more and more blood biomarkers, and build the platform better. By the way, when we started, it was before the iPhone. So, actually, the iPhone came in 2008, but it wasn't as abundant as today. So we started with a website, and then I don't know, 10 years ago, we built a mobile app. We added more and more modality of input. So we started with blood. I would say, like, I don't know, 7, 8 years ago, we added data from DNA, so microarray, and with imputation, we get to around 60 million SNPs. And with that, what we can do is a polygenic score, if anyone knows what is that. Basically, you look at a lot of SNPs, and based on that, you can know the risk. Do I have a risk for high cholesterol? Do I have a risk for low grip strength? Do I have a risk for dementia, and so on and so forth? And around 5 years ago, we added data from fitness trackers. So Apple Watch, Oura Ring, Garmin, Fitbit, and so on. And there you have a lot of data that can come in the cadence is much faster. So it can be even every 50 milliseconds you receive data, while with blood, every 3 months if you are very dedicated, once a year if you are a normal person. And DNA is once in a lifetime. And a couple of months ago, we added another modality, and that's basically the food that you consume. So we use a platform to allow you to scan your food for a week, and food and supplements. So then we know exactly what you eat, and based on that, we can tell you what macro and micronutrient you consume too much or too little. What is the intersection between your nutrition and sleep, your nutrition and exercise, and so on. And we also build a small app inside the app. For example, because we have the data from the fitness tracker, we have something called check-in. So every time, let's say, we told you to eat avocado, so you need to check in for avocado. But if you told you to sleep 7 hours, we know from your fitness tracker if you slept 7 hours or not. Or if we ask you to do aerobic exercise for 30 minutes every day, again, you will see. So we call it automatic check-in. So you don't need to check in. We know that you did it, and we can tell you. We can also send you a post-exercise notification. When to exercise, we can tell you how much water you should drink, how much protein you should eat, how much carbohydrate you should consume based on the length of the exercise, but also based on your biomarker composition and all of that. We also developed something that allow you to receive a report every week about what have you done with the fitness tracker, because today you receive a lot of information, but you don't know what to do. So we are basically providing to you information about how the data that we receive from the fitness tracker influence your health span. So if your step in that week is too much or too little, your sleep, your VO2 max, your HRV, and so on. So that is the high level the story. Just to finish, we today have hundreds of thousands of users. The majority of them are American, I would say 90% American, 5% Canadian, and the rest are all over the world. But still, my goal is to serve everyone in the world, so I'm looking forward to serve billions of people. And to do that, I think that the best way is to have a partnership with a big organization. So currently we're working on a partnership plan with big organization to work together with them. Any questions?
What about cortisol? Have you noticed anything about cortisol as a biotracker? Is that actually relevant, or what
Yeah,
is
it's very
it?
relevant.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, cortisol is a stress hormone,
Yeah.
and it's also important for muscle building. So we have a marker we call testosterone to cortisol ratio, because testosterone builds muscle and cortisol breaks muscle. So that's one. The second is cortisol is basically emotional stress. So when you have a high cortisol, you have a stress, and there are a lot of, cortisol is a very, very important marker for sure. Yeah,
Can I ask a follow-up? The testosterone and cortisol relationship, is that different for women?
It's not different for women, but women have around 10 times less testosterone. But still, the testosterone is important for women as well. We are testing testosterone. It's very hard to test free testosterone for women because it's really, really low. Women are much more complex, and unfortunately. No, I'm talking about as a machine. I'm not talking about anything else. I think that they are an underserved population. If you think about the NIH having demanded to have a clinical trial with women before, I think, 1997 or something like that. So we don't have a lot of data about women. And because of that, a lot of the side effects of drugs are actually shown in women, because nobody tested the drug on women, so surprisingly there are side effects. So yeah, women is something that it is, I think that it's there is a lot of needs there, and I just came from actually like yesterday from a big conference in Vegas called Health Conference. It's a very big conference, 13,000 executives of health companies, and I've seen a lot about women health. So I think that if anyone wants to do something about women health, I think that it's a great time to do it. There is a lot of needs, and there are also a lot of excitement, I think, from the funders and from the society. So absolutely, women health is an important part.
What heuristics do you usually try and optimize for when you're talking about, like, you're giving people plans, right? Is it just longevity, or are you working for like quality of life? Like, how do you optimize all of that in such a way that it works?
Yeah, it's a good question. So each of our users, we have something we call action plan. So the user, what happens is we collect all the information from you, and then we run it against our database of a lot of recommendations, and we feed the best recommendation for you. But part of it is also a goal. So you can come and say, my goal is to sleep better, my goal is to de-stress, my goal is, I don't know, to run faster, my goal is to lose fat. So we have around 12 goals like that, and based on that, we're optimizing the recommendation for that goal.
Okay, that sounds good.
How are you integrating all the data together, and who's making the decisions on whatever needs to happen? Does the physician quite understand all the different biomarkers, or?
No, it's all automated, software based. So we don't have a physician that make the decision here. It's all. We have a physician when we send you to the lab. Based on regulation, physician need to subscribe to the lab slip, and physician need to review the result if to see that there is not a panic value or any marker outside of the normal. So we have a physician for that, but the physician is not involved at all with the recommendation. It's all software.
Using yourself as an example, can you change us how your behavior has changed?
Yeah, it changed a lot. I can give you a few examples. So I haven't spoke about that, but we also developed, based on DNA, DNA-related scores, One of them is grip strength. I don't know if you know, but grip strength is a good indicator of longevity. So if you have a lower grip strength, again, statistical doesn't say a lot, but statistical people with lower grip strengths usually live shorter. So I tested, and we tested we have I don't know, 10 different polygenic scores related to longevity. One is bone mineral density and visceral fat, but my grip strength was in the lower 2%. So basically, I have a very low, and I tested it. There is a magnometer. It's basically a machine that you can buy it in Amazon in $20, and you can measure your grip strength. And I realized, I think, yeah, it is low. So now I'm doing like CrossFit like 4 or 5 times a week in order to improve my muscle. So again, the grip strength is not as important as your muscle mass. Why it is so important? Because when we are getting older, we tend to fall. When you fall, if you have muscle, it's protect the bones. If you don't have muscle, the bone will break. Now, when the bone break, especially if you are above 65, there's statistics that show that 70% of people that break their hip are dying within a year after they are breaking the hip. So again, it's something that I adopted for that. I have traditionally issues with high cholesterol, so I'm consuming oatmeal every day. I hate avocado. I didn't like avocado, but one of my recommendations was to eat avocado to improve my lipids. So I'm now consuming avocado and started to like avocado because now I understand that it's good for me. So those are a few examples, but I have many examples. Yeah.
Is there any you said, the old, getting old, I guess there are theories, studies that show by taking intake of proteins intake, so it gets improved. Is there you track in your system? Is there any way to tracking the progress? The old people who are increasing intake of the protein and they have improved.
Yeah. So we are around for let's say more than a decade. So we cannot yet track longevity, but what we can track is, for example, and we submitted a paper for that. We looked at our population, and we have tens of thousands of people that tested many times. So, for example, if you look at subcohort of people that started with high LDL, and you look at them for more than 6 tests in the follow-up, we see that they improved the LDL, continue to stay stable, and even improve it more. So what we see with our platform right now is that our users improve the biomarker related to longevity, LDL, glucose, inflammation, cortisol, and other. But I cannot say, and again, it's correlation, because I have a free-range humans. I don't have a control. So you need to remember that. It's very important for scientists to remember that we don't have a control. But we have a very good data of hundreds of thousands of people that show that statistically they improve. More than that, we looked at that subpopulation, and someone asked about the integration. So we look at this subpopulation and looked at improver and not improvers. And we separate them and started to look what is different in their fitness tracker data. And what we realized that people that improve LDL cholesterol, on average, are starting to accumulate much more steps than people that don't improve the LDL cholesterol. So we're starting to have multi-modality information that allow us to understand better a human body in N of 1, but also in the population way.
Is there a way to isolate the change in how you live life, right? Because if you go to purchase such a product, you're kind of saying, okay, I want to do something good for my body. Probably we'll try to walk more, or we'll try to do other stuff. Is there are you looking at the decay of the effect, to see what happens after they may ditch some patterns that they adopted when they consumed your product? Yeah.
What is interesting is that we are a very complex machine. So every time that I'm testing, I have a surprise that some are coming from the left or from the right. So I'm working on my glucose, suddenly my vitamin B12 is low. And I'm working on that, and the cortisol is going high. So I think that what is nice about it, it's like a lifetime endeavor. It's not like a quickie. And every time that you do that, you find other issues that you have. So yeah, you have the decay, but if you are dedicated enough and testing long enough, you started to see that a new thing coming. And also, it's very important for everything that you measure to have a baseline. So if you have a baseline, even if the value is normal and it started to creep up, that means that you have an issue. And for that we develop, again, I haven't mentioned that, but we develop something called optimal range. So we have the normal range and we have the optimal range. And the optimal range, we develop it based on your age and gender and ethnicity and athletic activity, so it's much narrower. So even if you are normal, but if you are not optimal, it's better for you to get into the optimal. So it's a tough life. I don't know anyone in the InsideTracker user that optimize all these markers. It's very hard to do it.
For people who ended up either kind of giving up or quitting the program, I'm curious if you've discovered any reasons of people who do that.
Can you ask again? I didn't understand.
Yeah. So for people who ended up kind of quitting the program or ended up giving up, deciding to leave, I'm curious if what are the reasons that you discovered?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that at first, I think that the program, and it's not only InsideTracker, is still complex. So it's good for, let's say, and I think that's a good lesson for you. When you start building a platform, you start it for the early adapter. Usually in our domain is the biohackers and I know executive of other companies that want to test your product and copycat it and stuff like that. So usually that's the beginning there. You get to hundreds to 1,000 users. And then you move to another stage that it's the early adopters, not early. So people that are a bit less early, but they're still early. So they will be willing to take the risk. And then you're starting to get with time to less and less early and more majority. We are still in the early adopter, having hundreds of thousands out of, I don't know, only the US you have more than 300 million. It's still early. So I think that something that this domain should do is make it as simple as possible and also build it as an onion in a way. That at the beginning it's very simple, but if someone wants to click or double click and go deeper and deeper, it should be engaging enough to someone that wants to understand and go deeper, but it should be as simple as possible for someone that just want to look at the information and go 10 seconds a day. That's what most people want to do. Sometimes I want to do it for I don't know, a minute or 10 minutes, but don't force me to do it a minute because I don't have time. Facebook is fun. Every day is MC, or I don't know, for you is TikTok. It's fun, but everything is changing. You need to, and also you need to build it in a way that the notification that you're sending to the user are not the same every day. It should be interesting, so I try to make it a mix and match and make it interesting and exciting. And sometimes eat them with the stick, that's okay, but don't eat them with the stick every day. Nobody likes that to say you're bad, so you need to mix and match it. I hope that I answered your question.
Thanks.
Okay.
Have you been able to sell the data to life or health insurance companies?
No. We haven't done it, but we have a lot of interest from companies that develop drugs and all of that, and they are coming to us and want us to do a research and help them to develop it, or products, yeah. But we haven't sold it to any health insurance or life insurance.
I think we got maybe one more question.
So you spoke earlier about the relationship between like longevity and hand grip. So what do you suggest as a way of life? Is it more important to have a bigger muscle mass, or is it better or is it cardio better in general? Weightlifting versus running.
Mass versus what? I didn't.
Cardio versus cardio,
okay.
Cardiovascular
so you're asking endurance
exercises.
versus strength.
Yep.
Both of them are very important, I have to say. So endurance is important for the cardiovascular system, and strength is very important for your longevity. So you need to find a balance. I can tell you what I'm doing. So I'm lifting weight 4 times a week, and I like cycling, and also it's hard for me to run with my knees, so I'm doing cycling like twice a week, and the last week I'm doing yoga because it's good also. You get the balance, and also you get stretching your muscle. But it's hard. A lot of my friends in my age like to play pickleball, and I like it, but I don't have time for that because I'm spending enough time in the gym. So you need to find, again, you need to optimize your life to do what is good for you. And when I realized that I have a problem with my grip strength, I did like CrossFit almost every day. But now when I build the muscle, now I'm a maintainer, so I can start moving more for the endurance. So it's always a balance that you need to maintain. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.